Okay, here we go. Kinesiology 230, Chapter 5, Responses and Adaptations to Resistance Training. This is presentation 1. I'm just going to jump into it and get rolling because we got a lot of content to go through here. Chapter overview, when we look at what it is we're going to go over here in the beginning of the chapter, these are the main things we're going to hit on. And we're going to go through them pretty quick. There's about, 8 presentations, plus I have a little sidebar one that I put together for you guys. And it's a lot of info, but I think we'll get through it. If we break it out, it's going to break out like this, and here are the corresponding page numbers, acute responses, and chronic adaptations. I want you to note that the verbiage there, acute responses and chronic adaptations. Then you have acute responses to training, chronic adaptations to training. We're breaking both those out. Factors that influence adaptation, and then overtraining and detraining. This is pretty beefy right here, the factors that influence. And I bundled this into a couple different presentations, and then this is tacked on at the end, which is kind of like a small section in the book. Okay, so if we start off, we're going to get into the intro and then acute responses and chronic adaptations, kind of like an introduction / overview. Let's jump into it and get rolling. So when you look at the 3 points that they make here, the first is this: when a client or novice or advanced, when a client is novice or advanced, each resistance training bout, if designed properly, will be a stressor on the body. And we've already talked about this. We talked about Hans Selye in terms of a general adaptation syndrome, or applying a stress to the human organism. I talk often about that in this class and all the kinesiology classes. We're really juxtapositioning his work evaluating single cell organisms and the human organism, and its training stressor is very much the electric stressor that Selye used to zap that little single cell organism. And I will tell you that good program design will strive to have a balance between the desired stress that we want to place on the human organism to get the desired training response. So you're trying to stress just enough to get the training response that you want. Now, what you have is over time, and this is another part when it comes to training and working out with people and coaching athletes, it's a summation of these stress responses that leads to a positive adaptation in the form of muscle growth, etc. So it's not just a one-off. As a coach or an athlete training for a sport, you have to be consistent and very methodical, if you will, and deliberate in your program design to make sure you have adequate dose amounts for dose responses to your training programming. You just can't come in once and work out and call it a day. And I see this all the time with athletes where they think they can work out once or twice and they're fine. No, it's a consistent, ongoing process. The second point the book makes, it requires progressive overload. You have to have the ability to think of it in terms of, here's the baseline stress that the body can handle, and you have to progressively just heap on a little bit more, if I can just use it like that. And that overload can come from the manipulation of training volume. It can come from the training or training intensity. And as a coach, you start talking about program design, you're trying to manipulate these variables, and it's the manipulation of these variables that brings about the conversation that is periodization. And periodization itself is just that. It is the scientific program design, long story short, to maximize gains and minimize the possibility of injury. They also describe, in terms of the chronic adaptations that you have here, they occur in phases, and I agree with this wholeheartedly. I've trained enough people, and I can tell you, when you first start training people, and I know I brought it up in a neurological presentation earlier where we talked about some neural stuff, the first responses that you've seen have less and very little to do, I should say, with muscle hypertrophy, meaning muscles getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's actually more about just the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system firing correctly to recruit the right muscles. And, in terms of like the phasing of this, you'll have an initial stage within the first month where you're going to have changes, but you're not going to have visual changes in terms of like how strong you are, etc. You'll feel it as a person who's working out, but other people really won't notice anything, and your weights will go up, but it's just a matter of you're getting more coordinated. Then after you get past the first month, then you start to notice some changes, and then after 2 months or so, then you start to really pick out some things, and people who know you will start to notice a difference in terms of your look, but also you'll have other improvements that they won't be able to see, like bone mineral density, etc. That takes quite a long time to present itself. So lastly, you have different clients who respond to training differently, and it depends upon the training itself. And so the way I kind of just wrote this out was different clients will respond differently to resistance training, but you also have to take into account another different in there, right? Different clients will respond differently to different resistance training. And it gets a little bit complex. I know it's like I'm kind of talking in circles, but you have different people with different somatotypes who will respond differently to different types of training. 3 sets of 10, 4 sets of 8, powerlifting type programs where it's sets of 4 and nothing higher. It becomes a conversation of how people respond, and it's based upon somatotype, fiber type, their wiring, their endocrine system, all these different things, and we'll talk more about it. And so it's kind of like a natural selection process when we start talking athletics. People who are really good at throwing stuff and super powerful are going to throw shot put. People who are really good at running long distances and have a somatotype that's built for that, one's endo, one's ecto, in terms of their somatotype, will naturally gravitate towards those sports. And the other part of it is, and they talk a little bit here, but effort and how a person refuels is also of great importance. You just can't have amazing workouts and not refuel, and have amazing workouts and not have recovery, like rest. You got to sleep. You got to do things to recover the body. I'm going to break off here and move on to the next one. Thanks.